Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to another phenomenal episode of Paranormal Axetvities with your host, Ben Axe. And this episode is brought to you by Free Lunch Coffee. Free Lunch Coffee is on a mission to end child hunger from this world. One bag of their coffee provides 10 meals to children in South Africa, and Free Lunch Coffee is giving away 50% of the money they make to end hunger from the lives of young children. That's right, Free Lunch Coffee is giving away 50% of the money they make to end hunger from the lives of young children. Their coffee is specialty grade, certified organic, and fair trade. They're also offering custom designed mugs and tumblers. Each mug provides 10 meals and a tumbler provides 20 meals to children in need. This could be great for Christmas gifts, and you are not just buying gifts for your loved ones, but you're also feeding the children. They offer 100% money back guarantee for 30 days, so you have nothing to lose. They're also offering 10% discount to the listeners of Paranormal Activities using coupon code PARANORMAL. So please check out Free Lunch Coffee at freelunchcoffee.com, and don't forget to use coupon code PARANORMAL for a 10% discount. One more time, please check out Free Lunch Coffee at freelunchcoffee.com. All right, guys, let's just get right here to it, man. So here in just a few minutes, we have AJ StrangeBrew joining the show from the Working Fans Wrestling Podcast. But before that, I have to talk about the Axetvities of the week. That's why you're all here, right? Well, unfortunately, I don't have a lot to say about that this week. We've heard a couple of noises here and there, but nothing concrete. So we had a lot last week. I talked about it, and things have slowed down. So I don't know what the deal is. I'm not sure how the paranormal works or why they're dormant, why they get active, why they get dormant. I don't know. But that's something we're going to talk about here with AJ. So let's just go ahead and welcome him to the show. Again, AJ StrangeBrew from the Working Fans Podcast. That's also located right here at alleverythingentertainment.com. So AJ, what's going on, brother?
Yeah, it's great to be here with you, man. I this is something I take seriously, and just to have a chance to be on this show, I'm excited.
I'm excited too, man. And real quick here, just so you guys know, support for Paranormal Activities is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in the men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Yeah, man. So have you got your gifts for Manscaped yet for your family and friends for Christmas?
Every guy that I know is going to have the best set of smelling and toned up balls in the neighborhood. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. I mean, it really is a cool gift. I've been using it here. That Manscaped has a redesigned electric trimmer. And I mean, there's a lot of fancy words here, but at the end of the day, it is. I used to use an old meant for your face trimmer for my entire body, from my head down to my whatever. And this just changed the game. You know what I mean?
The last thing you want to do is be using that old razor to tear up that stuff down there, especially as we get older. Let's face it, gravity makes things a little more trickier. It's nice to have the technology to help out.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really cool too that it's waterproof, so you can use it in the shower. You can get groomed basically whether you're in a dry environment, wet environment, it doesn't matter where you're at. And a cool, unique feature is it does have a LED light, which illuminates the grooming areas no matter where you're at. So yeah, like I said, guys, Christmas is coming up, so use promo code AXE2020 to get a 20% discount off of manscaped.com. And again, that is AXE2020. Very proud that the Manscaped is helping out with this episode of Paranormal Activities. So let's get right into it, man. Paranormal stuff.
Sorry, that's a I gotta tell you, I've been chomping at the bit all day to talk about this. I'm somebody who, you always hear people when they go to talk about it, they're like, I don't really believe in it, but then I had this happen. I was somebody as a child who had it happen to me. I had a rough childhood. I grew up in somewhat of an abusive household with a stepmom who would drink about a pint of vodka and then go at it with everybody in the house. So when I was a kid, the first time I remember, I was probably about 4 or 5 years old, and my fathers and her were going at it, and it was loud and obnoxious, and I can just remember being terrified in my bedroom, and I'm up on the top bunk with my sister down below me, and I'm just crying and terrified. And all of a sudden, I look up, and there's this almost like light at the end of my bed, and I see an older gentleman with like almost like an old fashioned like candle, looking right at me, and he had a look of peace in his eyes, like it's going to be okay, calm down. And even though he wasn't saying anything, as a young child, I can remember having that warm feeling and that you're going to be safe. Don't worry, it's not coming to you.
So that's kind of like sweet, I guess. Not to be weird or sentimental, but like, did you recognize the face at all?
I did not at the time. Now, I have to tell you that this does eventually tie into my family tree. My grandfather, when I was a young boy, he had come down and he would walk me growing up and stuff like that around the neighborhood. But when I was just under a year, there was not a helicopter, a plane crash where he actually passed away in the plane crash. He survived the actual plane crash, but had a heart attack as they were trying to get the survivors out. The other two people in the plane actually survived the plane crash. It was only a small plane with 3 people in it. So I had never seen his face or anything like that ahead of time. But we went to visit my meme because I'm French Canadian, and that's the weird name we call our grandparents.
Fair enough.
And yeah. So I go to visit my meme, and she's got the scrapbooks and the pictures. And I go to my dad and I tell him, because I had already told him about this story, and he, of course, treated me like most kids with, yeah, whatever. And I was like, Dad, that's the guy I see. And he's like, that's my father. That's your Pepe. And my grandmother started to get teary-eyed because apparently one of the last things that they had talked about before any of the death and stuff like that was he was already having like heart problems, stuff like that. He had already talked to her about what it would be like to have to protect the family, the wills, that kind of stuff. And his biggest concern was his family not being taken care of. And so to have him want that spirit or that essence, or I guess you could call it residue, whatever it is that you use to explain the phenomena, it's incredible to see it take form and to give me that peace as a young child to not worry.
Absolutely. And in that kind of scenario, it kind of sounds like, guardian angel style. Maybe he's always kind of around, but then, shit got real and you needed to see that. And then he appeared when you needed him.
And it's actually happened to me, believe it or not, through my life. And later on in life, I would go on to talk to, and this is probably something a little more serious than I usually talk about, but later on in life, I would go to talk to a psychologist when I was in my young teens. And I started to talk to the psychologist about, the abuse at home, what was going on, how my stepmother acted, stuff like that. And I told him, I said that no matter what was going on, I would see this person from time to time who was watching over me, protecting me. And he didn't believe in paranormal at all. So he told my dad and told my stepmom that he was worried that it was almost like a psychological break where I was maybe seeing something or manifesting something in my mind, almost like how a personality almost starts to split. So that gives you an idea as to how serious sometimes psychologists take the spiritual world.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of those things too, a lot of, especially when you're a young kid, a lot of people have imaginary friends, or they can kind of create what they need to get through a stressful environment. So, even if you're seeing, a paranormal entity, spirit, ghost, whatever you want to call it, I just call it ghost these days because it's just easier to say. But like I've said before the show that, I don't really believe in like, I don't know, the word's annoying, I guess sometimes, but that a lot of kids can manifest that stuff. And so it's hard sometimes to talk about with adults or guidance counselors or whoever, because they won't believe you in those kinds of scenarios in a lot of ways. But
and it made me actually shut off a little bit. So to a point where from that point on, I never trusted a counselor or anybody enough to actually tell them, hey, this is what I was going through. This is what it led to. No, they ended up getting divorced when I was 16. And the way that actually ended up happening, and this will be the last part of this that I actually talk about because it doesn't really have anything to do with ghosts, but she actually took a like 2x4 to hit me with, and I'm 6'3", 275 pounds. She hit me with the 2x4 across the back, and it broke in half. And I looked at her and just said, "That's the last time."
Really?
And
Yeah, Attitude Era, Jesus Christ.
yeah, so well, and that's the funny thing is that it almost plays out like a wrestling storyline, almost with just that look back and that intensity. But so that ghost that I've seen, I could have easily chalked it up to, you know, it was a childhood thing. It was something that doesn't. But then wrestling professionally, traveling through the Northeast as an adult, I had a snowstorm where my windshield wipers stopped working. I'm driving back from Maine to Connecticut, and I think I was traveling through Troy, New Hampshire at the time, and my windshield wipers stopped working. So I'm traveling through a blinding snowstorm, no windshield wipers, and I was probably 22 years old at the time, maybe 21, and I've got terrified driving through this. And all of a sudden, I feel almost like a presence on my hand on the shifter in the car. And I look next to me, and there he is again. So at that point, I'm like, all right, obviously he's not going away just because my childhood's over. Because that could have obviously terrified the crap out of me. But it was such a warm feeling of you're going to be okay, slow and steady. And at that point in time, believe it or not, the idea to take one of my laces out of my boots and put it onto my windshield wipers popped into my head. I would have never thought of that. And it popped into my head, and I actually tied the lace in between the two windshield wipers, and it made it enough give where it was able to actually start them so that they could be pulled again. Because the part it was a little part that broke inside of it that made it so that they wouldn't go. And by threading the lace through them and tying it down to where the mechanism was, I was able to get the windshield wipers to work for the rest of the trip.
Wow. And that's just something that just kind of jumped into your brain after you saw.
Yeah, anybody who knows me knows I am not a mechanical person. I was not sitting there thinking, okay, how can I fix these windshield wipers?
Right.
I was thinking, God, I'm going off the road and I'm going to die.
That's fair. And that's your grandfather, correct?
Yes. And now the funny thing is his job was he worked for a company called Wirewind when, like a lot of the French Canadians, when they came down, he came and worked in the textile mills, stuff of that nature. And his job was to mechanically basically fix things in the plant to make sure they could continue to produce the wire. So it's kind of ironic that all of a sudden this thing popped into my head to mechanically fix something when I have no mechanical background at all.
That is pretty wild, man. Yeah. And that kind of goes into one of the things I've talked about on the show a lot is they, if the spirits or whoever, they come when you need them. My wife has had a lot of experiences, and that's what she claims. Like her brother had passed away, and one of the things that she says is he comes when she needs him, but not all of the time. And it sounds like in this scenario with you, at least in these extreme situations, he's there really when you need him, and kind of hooking you up. So definitely like a guardian scenario, the way it sounds.
Yeah, I don't know if the presence is there all the time. I don't feel it all the time. It's not like I have spent my whole life just seeing him all the time. Right. But for whatever reason, in these time periods when something goes horribly wrong, there's just something, or somehow he just is there. And like I said, all of a sudden, it wasn't like somebody holding your hand, but it was like somebody like grazing your hand. You know how if you get close to somebody's arm and you do you can feel almost like the hairs go up to meet it?
Oh, absolutely.
That's kind of the feel that it was.
Gotcha. And on those two scenarios, when you saw him, I'm just out of curiosity, was it like a full body, or could you like see through him, or like how did he look when you saw him?
It was almost as solid as looking at you right now.
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, it's not like I looked down to see if his legs were there or to see if, so I don't know how much of his body was in the seat, but like from the upper torso up, it was literally like, and once again, it's not like he spoke to me. It's not like he was looking at me, and just these words of wisdom came out of his mouth. It was almost like telepathy where you're hearing the words, but not hearing them.
Sure, that makes sense. That's pretty wild.
But once
So,
again, as a little kid, I was in the bunk bed. So once again, it's just the upper torso.
right.
I'm not looking for legs. I'm not looking for, so I don't know how much of them was solid to me at the time. And Christ, I'm 44 years old. So you're talking about 39 years ago now. But
Absolutely. I get it. So, how long into that trip were you in? Like, how long did your shoelace or bootlace, I should say?
I was at a point where probably driving like that for like 20 minutes and
Wow.
I was stopping maybe every like maybe 2 miles to clear the windshield with my arm to frickin', and this was a old frickin' Buick Skylark. So you're not talking about the most modern of technology here.
Kind of a funny story for you here, real quick, I guess. It was just because you're a wrestling fan too. It's
Yeah.
not ghost related, but the very first time I went to a WWF event, it was at the Nutter Center in Dayton, Ohio, in January. And on the way home, I was in the back seat, and it was during a big snowstorm. And the same thing happened to my dad. We were driving home on I-75, and the windshield wipers stopped working during this big snowstorm. So when you mentioned your arm hanging out, he did the exact same thing. He would just try to do
I
that.
would literally just put my arm out and just almost like John Cena. You can't see me, just
Right.
hoping that's thankfully really long arms.
Oh, there you go. I mean, that is pretty wild, though. That you not being a mechanic, just realize that that would work. I would never think of that in a million.
I never in my life would have thought of it. But luckily, the wrestling boot shoelace also, not my sneaker, but the wrestling boot shoelace that was in my trunk was twice as long as a regular shoelace. So you're
Right.
talking about being able to I can tell you it was not popping into my head on my own to go, oh, go to your trunk, get your wrestling shoelace. That's I'm not that smart.
I'm not either. So that is pretty miraculous. And how many times have you seen him, do you think, throughout your life?
I would say 4. The other time, I cut the tip of my, I don't know if you can see it here, but there's a line that goes around and it's misshapen. I
Okay.
cut the tip of my middle finger off. We were playing baseball. The ball went into the sewer, and my friend lifted up the sewer grade. I reached in to grab the ball, and he dropped it, and it landed and cut off the tip of my finger. So, yeah, I carried it home, but he was with me when I was carrying it home. And my dad was freaked out when I carried it home because he's like, why are you so calm? And once again, I told him, I said, the reason why I was so calm, he's like, whatever, put it on ice and brought me to the hospital.
So you said he was with you. Like, did he walk home with you, like
He
side by
literally
side?
walked home with me. That's one of 2 times he walked home with me. He
Did you
walked
guys
home with
like
me
talk?
there. He talked the whole time, not like a talk, like once again, not like I'm talking to you,
Right.
but more like him just telling me to keep calm. It's going to be okay. You're not far from home. You're going to be fine. And sure enough, when I the short walk home, my dad put a tourniquet on my finger right away. Put the fingertip on ice. They put the tip back on. For all of 4th grade, I got to flip off the teacher because I had a cast on my middle finger.
There you go.
Uh, she did keep reminding me that I could use my other hand to ask questions, but whatever.
Priorities.
The other time I was in 2nd grade and we had just moved to a new place and I missed my bus in 2nd grade and started walking home. I had no idea how to get home. So all of a sudden he shows up and walks me the rest of the way home on a rainy, wet day where easily being a 2nd grade kid, God knows what could have happened.
Right. Absolutely. And it was the same kind of idea there. He just walked with you and just
Just
kind
tell me it's going to be okay. This is the way to go. Not even necessarily with words, but almost like arm around the shoulder. Hey, this is the way to. Uh, I got to tell you, when I say this out loud, it sounds crazy and and I'm sure that a lot of people that listen to this are going to be like, wow, that's freaking nuts. But
And
it's
man,
a
don't worry
presence that
about
shows up.
absolutely. Don't worry about that. We've said my stories alone on this show have been way, way nuts. So don't feel like people will judge you, because if they did, they wouldn't be listening to the show. So everybody listening, we're all on the same page here.
We're not even talking about this. I'll tell you what, another time, and we'll keep talking about this part. Next time you have me on, Chuck, this is to get me to come back on. From bartending in places that were colonial meeting places and stuff like that in New England, I have scary stories all up the yin yang that'll make your skin crawl.
We got plenty of time.
We can do that today. Then let's do this. Let's say I would have loved to have shared this one for Halloween. So I'm working in a bar. The name of the bar was Chasers, and it was a meeting place in Norwich, Connecticut, for pre-revolutionary meetings to actually figure out what they were going to do against the British and stuff of that nature. And the cellar where they actually stored all their munitions, stuff like that. Now you got to remember, Norwich is a place where Benedict Arnold is from that area. You've got Samuel Huntington. It was a stopping place for George Washington, John Adams, when they were going back and forth between New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. That was the stopping place that they would go and stay overnight. You've got the Leffingwell Inn, but all of these places are hotbeds for freaking colonial activity. And so I go down and I needed to change a keg. And I'm changing a keg in this cellar where they used to keep the ammunition and all the stuff of that nature down there. And I'm changing the keg, and all of a sudden, the gate, which is this heavy cast iron gate, I hear slam shut behind me. So I spin around as fast as possible to see what the hell is going on here. And there's a dude sitting there in full red coat, angry British, looking at me with his freaking bayonet. I could see it as clear as day, staring right at me as I'm changing this keg. And I'm sitting there going, oh, Christ. And he looked like he was going to charge at me with this thing. So I, being the idiot that I am, just flat out, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Just talking to him like a regular person. And he just has this angry look in his eye. And I can start to feel my skin crawl. I don't get scared very often. That doesn't happen when you're my size. But this is one time in my life where there might have been a little urine heading down the leg.
It's funny you bring that up, man. I've heard a lot of stories about like old bars, like cellars where the kegs are. A lot of the story you just told me, I've heard several variations of that same story throughout doing this show and talking to people just from around the country.
Yeah, this place is to give you an idea as to how interesting of a place this is. The only the oldest newspaper that was in the area is literally the building next door.
Oh yeah,
you go down there and the basement is literally cut out of the earth with the limestone and the freaking. I had to bend over to walk anywhere in the basement because being 6'3", it was made for a different time period where people were a little bit on the smaller side. And yeah, so I'm if I don't bend over, I'm hitting my head on something. and to be honest with you, I don't know if I had a concussion that night to see that.
That's fair. And same kind of question here. When you saw the apparition in the basement, was it a full body apparition? Could you see?
This was not. This was more of almost like a misty kind of, almost like if I wiped my hand through it, it might go away.
Gotcha.
But when you see something holding a freaking musket with a bayonet on top of it, you don't really want to take that chance.
That's fair. I'm not gonna say I'm afraid of ghosts, but I would be afraid of anything with a gun, whether it be a any kind of gun from any kind of time period.
But my guess would be it's somebody who either, because that whole area, they used it for imprisonment, they used it for all kinds of stuff. It could just be the energy left over from a guard, and he's seeing, somebody in the cell. So to him, maybe he's seeing something too. We don't know what effect we're having on their world.
And that's an interesting question I kind of want to talk about with you, with all of these experiences. there's when it comes to theories of the paranormal, there's a lot of, you mentioned the energy that's just kind of sitting there, kind of repeating itself. It's, there's a word for that, residual, I think is what they kind of go with on that one.
I'm a believer in sometimes in that's what's happening. I think with like my grandfather, I think that it's more of almost like you said earlier, like a guardian, like
Right.
they're almost put in place to watch over us, to kind of protect us a little bit.
He's a
But I
conscious
think,
spirit. Like he would definitely be a conscious. He knows where he's at. He knows where you're at. He knows what the role is here. Like,
yeah. Whereas I think that with like the soldier, I don't think that that's conscious at all. I think that that's that energy, that residue. I think there's something that trips it, whether it's somebody coming through that energy or just an event coming through it that kind of trips it to make it almost become visible.
right.
If that makes any sense.
It does, and it's one of those things. Like I keep because I hate because like I'm a scientific person. Like I try to be anyway. I believe in like space and like evolution, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to me, the residual energy does not make sense. It just doesn't.
So see, now here's how I can make this make a little bit more sense to somebody from the scientific world. Look at the human body. The human body itself. When you have your neurons and everything are actually creating energy inside your brain, the way that we function is through energy. Right. It's actually literally almost like a computer with neurons just pulsating energy as you go. Now, if you take a battery and you take, say, a 9-volt battery or something like that, now it doesn't technically have energy that it's necessarily pulsating, but if you stick your tongue up to it, it condenses it. And it causes it to have, and even after something's gone, like static cling, has that residue energy that is left behind. Now, because we have energy in the body, like the neurons in our brain, what I believe in is that we leave that residue, that static cling almost, that static energy when we leave somewhere. And if something tragic happens or something is a big part of our life, like it was our home for 50 years and all of a sudden we have a traumatic death in there, right. Those neurons are the last thing that was firing in there, and it leaves that energy. That's how I look at it from a scientific point of view.
I mean, that's a great way to look at it. It's one of those things like I have a hard time wrapping my head around that, but there was too much evidence to support that I can't disagree with it. So, the point is to try to figure out how. I mean, I guess it could be a point, but I want to know how or why. Because I'm a firm believer that a lot of spirits aren't trapped in one location. They're not going to be just repeating their same action over and over again in the same spot for 100, 200 years. But, just like my belief in aliens, there's not just one type. There's probably several types of paranormal entities with several different kinds of rules and reasonings and that kind of stuff. And
I am so glad you brought that up. I've never seen aliens. But like yourself, I believe that why would there be only one type of alien? There's not one type of person on the planet. If every planet if planets out there have different life forms on them, why would there be only one version of a life form?
Absolutely. It's one of those things. I call it the Star Trek rules. There's just, a shit ton of planets with a shit ton of different kinds of life. That's just the way it is.
It just doesn't make sense. We get this idea because we see a movie that has a Martian in it that, this is what a Martian is going to look like. It's going to be a little green guy who's looking to probe your ass.
Right.
And how could that possibly be that out of all the billions of planets in different, not just our solar system, different solar systems that go God knows how far that we can't reach. Yeah, there's got to be one life form.
Yep. And that's the thing. People just get caught up on that. It's so easy to get caught up on that too. Well, their ships look like this and this and this. Well, that could be one of them. But, in reality, there's probably, there has to be. Even if, let's say no alien has ever been to Earth, there are no UFOs, that's fine. There's still a shit ton of planets out there with life. There just has to be. That's just the end. It's just the end of it.
and once again, why would they have just one ship? We don't have one type of car.
Right.
We don't have one type of plane.
Absolutely. So, but that's kind of how I feel about the paranormal. There probably are different set of rules for each type of phenomena, whether it be a residual ghost, whether it be a conscious ghost, whether it be a ghost who chooses to be here, or whether it be a ghost who is trapped here. And then there's probably other entities as well. I'm not going to use the word demons and angels, but there are definitely evil entities out there. I can just say from experience.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
like,
if somebody is a conscious ghost and they weren't a good human, why would they be a good ghost?
truth, and that's one of those, people are scarier than ghosts any day of the week. And if you have an evil person who dies, who is still doing things, that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to run into Hitler's ghost. That's I don't know about you. That's
No,
not me.
absolutely. That's one of those.
That's the
Have you ever heard of any like Hitler ghost stories or like any like iconic? I mean, honestly though, there are iconic ghosts even in this area. There,
very much.
yeah, man.
That's a sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I just realized I'm just kind of thinking out loud. There was a hotel near here called the Golden Lamb Hotel, like presidents stay there and all that good stuff. And now that I'm thinking about it, there are like Abraham Lincoln ghost sightings and shit like that in that hotel. So I don't know of any Hitler ghost stories, but I don't think I want to.
Yeah, but think about all the celebrities. Think about the people who have in Hollywood hotels and stuff like that who have seen the ghosts of singers and actors, and how many people have seen the ghost of Elvis outside of Graceland. And
That's a good
it,
point.
it's incredible how much there is out there. Now, that being said, I think people are almost less likely to talk about the negative stuff because they're almost afraid of, like, could you imagine the what would happen to somebody if they were, say, in like Bonn, Germany, and they came home? They're like, dude, you're not going to believe this. I'm over there. I'm going by this bunker. I ran into Hitler's ghost.
Right.
Dude is so much chiller than I thought he was going to be.
Yeah,
Yeah, he didn't even think, he didn't even talk about wiping me out. I don't get it.
It's funny you bring that up, though. I mean, that's not funny, I guess, but I had a guest a while back. O'Keefe Cannabis was her last name. She's an author of several books. She had a lot of ghost stories from her visit of Auschwitz, and it was really, really interesting and really, really sad at the same time. But still,
have you ever been to the Holocaust Museum?
I have not. In Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. When you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., when you go into places like they have the room that has all the shoes from, unfortunately, all the victims that were killed in Auschwitz and stuff of that nature.
Right.
And when you go in there, the energy that you feel, and you can't not feel the sadness and the pain. Same thing with going to Gettysburg. When you go to a place like Gettysburg, the energy that just pulsates through, and look at the amount of spiritual sightings alone when you go to Gettysburg. You have people that are historians that don't necessarily believe in the paranormal that go there, and they come back and their mind is completely changed.
Nope, absolutely. I have been to Gettysburg. That being said, though, I was in 8th grade, so I, but I will say I do remember it being a negative place, dark, dreary. Even when the sun was out, it's still dark and dreary, which is weird, but it just is. It's a heavy place, and I really do want to go back there now as an adult with doing this show and that kind of stuff, and really kind of dig into it.
Well, one of the places that I would actually like to go is to London. I would love to go to those streets and stuff where Jack the Ripper and his victim took his victims, and see what that must be like. Because can you imagine? It's dreary to begin with in London, and you have all of the history there. But you talk about somebody who left negative residue in an area and left just an absolute. I mean, they never caught the guy. So Lord knows how many victims he had that they didn't even know about. And the fear, that's something, once again, that can leave negative residue.
Oh, absolutely.
Fear that people had in that area. It's just got to be absolutely amazing walking the streets of London at nighttime. And
I imagine. Yeah, man. Especially like a lot of, I think with Alex on the show a few weeks ago, we talked about, with UK and London being so old. I mean, even with, America, we've been around since we became a country in 1776, which is old. But, the UK and London, they have really, really old buildings, a lot more history than I have here in Ohio. And it's just, so much history and energy, negative and positive. There's just so much going on. Those cities over there would definitely be interesting. And that's why there's a lot more haunted stories and movies and documentaries about over there compared to here. Because even now, we don't keep old buildings around. We tear shit down and build new stuff. So
Well, even if you think about the oldest buildings that you have that were predate us to colonial times, you're talking about places like Roanoke, and you talk about beginnings of New York City when it was New Amsterdam and stuff of that nature. Even that only goes back to the early 1600s when they first really started to grow it up. So you're talking about 400 years at the most, compared to a history of thousands of years for some of the parts of, say, Egypt or Italy or over there where they actually started building civilization thousands of years ago. I mean, that's incredible.
It really is. With all of the people that have come through there, that's just every day, just more energy. And it just lasts and lasts and lasts over generations and generations. And
You take places like Greece and Italy where they also continued to build over some of them. They have aqueducts and stuff there that were built over, and now if you go underneath, thousands of years ago, they had people dying there, people being buried, people tragedy. You have the Colosseum where people were being fed to lions, for Christ's sakes.
oh
I
yeah,
mean,
and
think
imagine
about the
that,
activity.
sure, and imagine that fear and that all of that emotion being just dropped there during all of that. It's insane when you think about it. Just like Gettysburg, just like Holocaust, any kind of facility that has that much negative energy. And one of the things when I started doing this show was asking about the residual spirits, because I'm a firm believer that a lot of ghosts can bounce around, go where they want to go. They're not trapped in one house or one location. But I did visit the Waverly Hill Sanitarium in Louisville, Kentucky, like 10 years ago or so. And my question was, well, this place is that haunted. Why would they choose to stay there? And so, like, you have, I mean, we talked about energy and that kind of stuff, but can these spirits that are stuck there because of negative energy or emotion or whatever, is there a way to get them out of there, or is there a way to make that a happy ending, or are they just damned for eternity, just reliving the hell they had to go through? Does that make sense?
Well, I think you have to have Jennifer Love Hewitt tell you to go to the light. No, I do think that you can actually escape. I think that unfortunately, you got to remember a lot of those sanitariums and stuff were used for things that we wouldn't normally now use them for. They would keep mentally handicapped people there.
Sure.
They would keep people with different levels of capacity there, and basically would torture them with things like freaking shock treatment or water treatments that they thought would help cleanse them of their problem, which now we realize is actually just a handicap in that they need help and a little bit of guidance. Back in as soon as the early 1900s, late 1800s, we were still basically keeping people. Even in Norwich, we have the Norwich, and it's been on so many different shows. I don't want to plug them on here, but they have a state asylum there that they ended up bulldozing over. But people would go there and do tours and try to see the paranormal activity and stuff like that. And I think that we can get them out. I think that we have to be understanding. You have to bring somebody who has the ability to communicate with them. I do believe there are people that can communicate. I don't think that everybody who claims they can communicate with them. I think some people are more showmen than anything.
Absolutely. Hashtag adventures.
Exactly. And that's actually the one I was trying not to plug.
Yeah, I knew it was. Well, I've actually had a guy on my show from Ghost Adventures. He had plenty of negative things to say about it, so I'm okay talking about it.
Yeah. He seemed like he was a little more interested in his hair products than he was actually getting to the bottom of anything.
Absolutely.
But I think that if you have the right people, the right mediums there to help along the way, that you can get people to use a term that people understand, crossover.
Right.
To understand and be free that, hey, you don't have to be stuck here in this place that tortured you. You don't have to maintain here. And I'm not going to go into a religious thing because that's not my thing. I'm not going to tell you that there's a heaven, that there's a hell, that there's places people go. That's not for me to judge. But I do believe that you can transition into a different area and that you don't have to stay stuck in that one spot.
I like to agree with that as well. And it's just kind of figuring out how to do it, where to do it, and really break the reasons why they're there and try to figure out how to cleanse that area. And I'm all for saging and cleansing. I do it in my house quite often. But the one thing I've learned about cleansing and saging is it's not a permanent fix. It will alleviate stuff, but the energy always kind of creeps back in, if that makes sense.
I think what we need to do is at some point, once all things start to go back a little bit more to normal, is maybe get together a Paranormal Activities working fans group and go somewhere and see if we can go to one of these
I like it.
haunted places and maybe see if we can see what's going on there.
Absolutely. So we do have some more time here, and
Absolutely.
I believe you have some more stories for us. So let's get
I do.
all right, man. So
This one's going to be a little bit different for you.
all right.
I used to work. I don't know if I can say it on here or not. If they want to come after me, it's fine. I worked for Foxwoods Casino. It's one of the largest casinos in the world and the largest one in North America. It's in, and a lot of tragic things have happened there. You've got people that have committed suicide because of losing gambling. You've got people who have done bad things, even bartending there. I saw a lady one time. This isn't a ghost story. She just took her. She felt like the young lady next to her boyfriend was communicating a little too much. She took her Heineken bottle, broke it, and jammed it in her eye. Yeah. This is supposed to be a classy bar inside of a casino. But you're talking about all kinds of things happening in this casino.
Right.
I had a young lady, my first year working at Foxwoods, her pacemaker stopped. So I'm turning to my cash register bartending, and I turn back around, and the lady's gone. She had hit the floor, and her pacemaker had stopped. And unfortunately, she did not survive. So that was kind of grained into my memory. So now I didn't actually see this person, but I could feel later on, as years went on, nights when I was closing down, I could actually feel somebody sitting in that spot, that same spot that it happened. I could feel somebody sitting there. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that could be me projecting because of what happened. But this is where it's going to get a little creepy. I'm on the other side of the bar one night, and the girl that I'm working with screams. And so I come running around the bar to the other side, and she's shaking. She's freaking. And I'm like, what's going on? And now this girl did not work here when the first one happened. She was a relatively new bartender. This is maybe 4 years later. She did not work there. She says, I turned around. There was a lady sitting there. The lady fell to the floor. I looked on the other side of the bar, and there's nobody there. And that's why she screamed, because she saw a lady sitting in that seat. And I asked her where it happened. It was that seat. She says, I saw a lady. She was sitting there clear as day. I saw her just fall out of her seat. She's like, there's nobody there. That's
pretty wild. Now I know I imagine you guys don't have access to the security cameras, but
we do not.
I wonder if caught on the security camera though.
And I asked security. I told them I didn't tell them fully what happened, because I thought that at that point they would look at me like, I'm not looking at the camera, you schmuck.
Right.
But I told them, I said, you know, my partner saw somebody fall out of their seat, and we want to make sure that they're okay. And the security guard went, yeah, I can't do that. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I can't do that. I can't just pull up the security camera because your partner thinks they saw somebody fall off their seat and they crawled away. I was like, he's like, what I would have to do to get permission to actually look at that camera to apparently in a casino, it is not easy to get permission to look at a security camera.
Dude, fair enough. I mean, I don't know anything about this casino rules. Jesus. I feel like a health concern would be the perfect time to look at a camera.
And that's what I said, but the security guard literally was like, yeah. I don't know if he just didn't want to fill out paperwork to have to look at a camera because this girl was hallucinating.
Fair enough.
That's
How long
But
ago was that, do you think? Like, how old were you or whatever?
well,
Like,
that was 2008 that that hers would have happened around, whereas mine was around maybe 2001, 2002 when I first started there.
gotcha. So
So you're
like a
talking about 12 years ago?
okay, gotcha. And like a 7 year difference in between when the person had passed and then when she
Exactly. And like I said, she was a new bartender. She would have no idea that the pacemaker thing happened.
right. And I feel like a casino like that happening probably wouldn't be a lot of word of mouth, whatever. Like, nobody would probably
No, because the
later.
amount of people that we've lost 7 years later in between. I mean, I had regular guests. I can't even tell you how many regular guests because of the age that most gamblers are that passed away in the time that I worked there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Man, that's
Yeah.
pretty wild. Like that kind of stuff you can't really like make up or you can't really justify or explain. It's just something that just happens. You know what I mean?
But once again, because I was there for the original incident, it could have been my energy pulling the spirit in, and she just happened to see what my energy brought into the, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, I could see how that could be. I mean, energy is always connected, right? And
Exactly. And because I'm that person who was there when it happened on a lunch shift with maybe three of us in the bar. So the only people that would have seen it would have been maybe the manager, myself, and one of the servers that was there because it was first thing when we opened up the restaurant, the casino. And so you're talking about maybe three people being in the restaurant at the time. And then
right.
obviously the paramedics who came to get her.
That's pretty wild. So, of the times that you worked there, had anybody else seen anybody fall, or was it just that one time that
That's
happened?
the one time that I know of. But I also stopped working in that bar right after that. I'm
Gotcha.
not going to lie to you. I got out of there quickly at that point and took an assignment in another bar.
Did you leave that incident?
I that to me is one of the most regretful ones because if that is where that young lady's spirit or whatever is stuck, um,
Pretty rough.
that's very sad to me that you spent your whole life doing God knows what. And when I say young lady, you're talking about like a 60, 70-year-old lady.
Gotcha.
I just get so used to working for tips and calling elderly women young ladies. Um,
Understandable.
but for the fact that that's the where her energy, because it was so tragic, stops, or maybe it's because that's where a pacemaker is basically a battery that keeps your heart going. So once again, from a scientific point of view, you're
Sure.
talking about energy stopping, and maybe that's where the energy just stopped for her,
And it
and
just
now she's stuck.
and it stayed there. That could be a thing. Like that's pretty wild when you think about it in that way. But one thing I'm noticing here with some of your stories, well, we have two in a row now that took place at a bar, and I like
I was a bartender for 20 years, so you're going to see a lot of that.
forgot to go to class. I need to cool it. I think. I'm sure I want to be a ghost in a bar.
I do have a fun one from Newport, Rhode Island.
Oh, let's. I've never been to Rhode Island. I'd like to get to the East Coast one of these days.
It's a nice little state. It is the smallest state in the country. They do say they're the biggest little state in the country, but that's like being the pound for pound the strongest guy. That just means you're not the strongest guy. You're just strong for your size.
Your weight class.
But so there's a hotel, and it's one of the oldest hotels in all of the East Coast in the United States. And right next to it is the oldest synagogue in the U.S. And my daughter, Morgan, who is, God, I'm getting old. She's 21. She was there and she's taking a photograph, and in the window, you literally in the photograph see, and I will see if I can get a copy of the photograph for you to send to you, but I'm sure she still has a copy of it. You see in the window upstairs the person's head. So you see like the white and almost like the powdered wig, and you see like this head looking out the window. And if you look and you actually look at the picture of the person who's on the plaque saying how old the house is when their name, you look at the pictures and they look almost identical.
Hmm.
And
Oh,
you see the picture in the window, the person just looking out at my daughter while she's taking the photo.
Dude, that's really creepy. It kind of reminds me. I brought this show up before, but the Haunting of Hill House and the Haunting of Blind Manor. There's a scene just like that, and I think those shows really nail how like the paranormal functions and works. Really drives your
Well, and to
emotion.
give you an idea, she was 18 at the time, so you're talking about 3 years ago, and she took the photo. And I when I saw it, I was like, "Holy Christ!"
I would love to get that photo, and if you share with me, I'd love to put it on like the social media accounts and stuff
Yeah,
like.
absolutely. I'll message her today and see if she can get me that photo for you.
I love that. Well, hey man, we're getting close to the end of the time here. I really do appreciate your stories, and I'll definitely love to have you back and hear the rest of them. It sounds like you have quite an extensive career of paranormal experiences, man.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, it's not something that I necessarily shy away from or something that I go looking for either.
Sure.
I think openness and having an open mind and sometimes not being afraid of what's out there. I mean, it's important to have a healthy respect, but not having necessarily a fear. I think sometimes fear leads to ignorance, and people a lot of times just shut things off. Like we talked about with aliens, I think that sometimes people let their ignorance and openness to other things, because if we can exist, why can't other things exist?
Absolutely, and I agree with all of that. The reason I started this show in the first place was because of that. I've had experiences my entire life. My wife had a ton that were kind of escalating at that time, so I was like, "Fuck it, let's talk about it," and that's why this show exists.
Well, the reason why I wanted to be on this show, and I'll be honest with you, is because and we've got so many great shows on All Everything Entertainment,
Absolutely,
a spectrum of everything that you can imagine. Not only that, but if everybody goes to the website, alleverythingentertainment.com, you can actually find great writing on every subject that you can imagine, from MMA to sports to paranormal to but the
true crime.
reason why, yeah, true crime. The reason why I wanted to be on this show was because this is the show out of all the shows that we have, other than my own, because I'm an egomaniac, that I watch. Um, and I don't miss a week. That's why you'll see the comments from me and stuff like that, because I absolutely love checking out paranormal activities.
I mean, I really appreciate you, brother. I appreciate that a lot. It's one of those things. It is kind of hard. When I first started, it was kind of tough because you are just letting your all your crap out there. My friends, family, whoever, they may not have known some of the stuff I had to say, and then
Oh
here.
God, I can't wait to get the feedback from the people who I haven't shared this stuff with, because this isn't something that I talk about with everybody. It's not like my everyday friends. I'm like, hey guys, by the way, this is what I've seen.
Absolutely. With my buddies, it's only like when we're drinking all day long and the night comes to the end, they're like, "So what about that ghost stuff?" And then I'll just like talk for an hour. But yeah, in my everyday life, I don't talk about it. So it's a good outlet. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me today and talk about your experiences and your thoughts on how it all works, Matt. That was awesome. And I super greatly appreciate you, brother.
It's absolutely my pleasure anytime. And as always, we look forward to having you on the show again, because your knowledge of wrestling is so much better than Josh DeBoard's.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you acknowledged that. I mean, that's just common sense, though, right? Like we all know
I,
that.
I think we can all see it. I mean, it's nice of you to carry Josh around like you do.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Here, so let's talk about your wrestling show, the Working Fans Podcast. Where do we find you? How do we find you? When are you on? And just tell us about your show.
Every Wednesday night live on All Everything Entertainment. We got the YouTube. They do the Facebook Live for us. I'm sorry, I just saw a comment where Josh is apparently looking for some belt.
Yeah, he knows it or something. I don't really know. Nobody cares about belts anymore. Anyway,
No, belts mean nothing. We learned that in the WWE. But every Wednesday night, 6 p.m., check out the Working Fans podcast live on All Everything Entertainment. And then we also drop the podcast every Thursday the next day, just in case you missed it, so that you can hear all the debates and the arguments that we have.
absolutely. And talking about comments right now, we have quite a bit. We have Joe Seart the third. I'm saying his name right. I think I always butcher it when I say it, but he was watching. Thanks for watching, Tyler. And Joe is part of your show. He's also part of the Working Fans Podcast. So thanks for watching, Joe. We will
I'm
put you.
glad he's I'm glad he's sober enough to actually be tuning in. That's fantastic.
Well, he wouldn't be the only one that was not sober. Typically, I have a few whiskeys before these shows, so hopefully that was coherent the entire time. Yeah, be sure to watch the Working Fans podcast every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on alleverythingentertainment.com. I got the time there, right?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on alleverythingentertainment.com. And again, guys, huge thanks to all of you guys watching right here at AE.com. Be sure to watch all the amazing shows, all the amazing writing, artwork, scripts, everything they write. We have sports, we have superheroes, we have horror, we have true crime, we have wrestling, all of your favorite stuff. And again, real quick here, this episode was presented by manscaped.com. Be sure to use promo code AXE2020 to get 20% off discount on all of your Manscaped products. Great for Christmas gifts, great for birthday gifts, and just great for your own personal use. Highly recommend it. All right, man. And again, huge thanks to AJ for joining me tonight, man. I hope you had a good time and hope to have you back one of these nights.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And most importantly, stay safe and have a great Thanksgiving, sir.
Absolutely. You as well, man. Happy Thanksgiving. And at the end of the day, let's just keep all learning about the paranormal together.